This is the Unlock Your Inner Creator series, and I'm your host, Noilyn Mendoza. My intention with this series is to spark conversations with passionate changemakers and creatives that bravely dared to dream of new ways and took massive action. Despite the chaos that's happening around us, a radical and liberated future, a new earth can be realized and is possible if we choose to take brave steps. So I invite you to explore with me what that can look like. Hi everyone, welcome back. It is the third season of the Unlock Your Inner Creator series. It is winter and we're in the throes of it. It's crazy. I don't know about you, but for the past few weeks, I have been in total hibernation mode. I just want to cocoon. I just want to stay indoors. It's cold. And I'm just really feeling all of this energy to go inward, both literally and figuratively. So with that, I think it's only fitting that this season of the Unlock Your Inner Creator series, we are focusing on the power of the pause. Slowing down, restoring ourselves, nurturing ourselves in all the ways, because rest is also a vital part of creating the new earth that we want, isn't it? My intention for this series has and will always be to spark conversations with passionate change makers and creatives that bravely dare to dream of new ways and are taking massive action toward this liberated future, not just for themselves, but for others, their families, and in their communities. As we open this conversation, I call on the energy of winter, the energy of conservation, of reflection, and going inward. What does that mean for you to slow down, tend to your dreams, and give space for deeper connection with yourself and others? So I invite you to explore with me what that could look like. And I'm super excited because I have a very, very long time and dear friend who is joining me to kick this season off. Sapna Pandya is a queer South Asian organizer, advocate, strategist, pandita, and mother. Over the past 20 years, she has worked at various organizations in the US and also abroad, primarily focused on immigrant justice and public health. In her natal city of Washington, D.C., Sapna incorporated a hyperlocal, multiracial immigrant justice nonprofit called Many Languages, One Voice in 2010. MLOV was established to expand participatory democracy for and by DC-based immigrants who don't speak English as their dominant language, particularly focused on health, education, and labor rights. And after leaving there, Sapna created a company called Chingaree Consulting to continue providing support for various social justice endeavors. Sapna has been honored multiple times as a leader in language justice, LGBTQ rights, and for serving as an officiant for progressive Hindu weddings. Ooh, we need to talk about that a little bit more. This is new. She speaks Hindi, Urdu, Gujarati, Spanish, and English. Sapna lives in DC with her wife and their spirited toddler. So everyone, please welcome the oh so versatile and expansive Sapna. Welcome.
Thank you so much. No, it's so good to see you.
Awesome. Good to see you too. I'm glad that we're
Yeah.
sharing the space, albeit virtually. But is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
No, I think that's a lot. And like you said, multifaceted, lots of different things going on, which I'll talk about.
Lovely. Awesome. Okay. So we always start these conversations to ground us and to center us. And one of the ways that we do that is we call in people that have been most influential to us. Who do you want to call into the space? Who has been most influential to you in shaping your life and who you are today?
So I'll start with a person that I've met very recently who was actually my doula. And her name is Maria Luz. And I met her not from the doula practicing, I met her from the nonprofit space and doing conflict resolution and having difficult conversations, which comes up all the time in the nonprofit world. And so I had actually contracted Maria Luz before I even knew I was going to be pregnant, and she was just amazing. And then I find out she also does this, and then I find out she's also a dancer, and then I find out that she's also an artist. And it was like one of those moments, it was really one of those moments like where I, which is again very recent, where I realized the potential of being able to hold all of these things and to be present in each of those things and to excel and be amazing in each of those things, because the same energy she brought to conflict resolution and doing that kind of counseling work in the nonprofit space, she was there 100 and maybe 50% for me in as a doula, being with me all the way up to the time I was maybe 8 or 10 weeks, through to being in the room with me when I was in labor, and since has been like a nyanya, an auntie to Saira as well. So that's definitely one person that just continues to inspire me as somebody who can hold all of these different roles and hats and do it with such grace and beauty. So she's an incredible person. Honestly, I think a lot about our elders, and I don't want to even name, like, I have my grandmothers as examples, but frankly, I think of even all the unnamed and unknown elders whose shoulders we stand on, because they just had to evolve into so many different roles, because if that's what had to happen. My grandfather was a bicycle messenger in India before he immigrated to the US. And when he passed about 5-6 years ago, he had already done about 30 years of being a pandit, a religious scholar, right? Like, it was such a flip from what he was doing in India and just something he picked up as his second life here in the US. And especially for folks who migrate, but even if you don't migrate, our ancestors have just had to continue to evolve and become so many different things. And I constantly think about that, about how that is part of my lineage, my history, my heritage, and for so many of us, I think, from immigrant backgrounds. So yeah, I'll start with those two, and there may be more that come up, but
Oh, so beautiful. And I love that you uplifted Second Life, multiple identities.
Mhm.
Because, I think for a lot of us, and you and I have had these conversations before, where it's so oftentimes our identities are so siloed, you don't really see the whole person.
Mhm.
And then you don't realize until you are in these spaces that obviously they have so many other interests. There's so many other facets of individuals that make them who they are.
Yeah.
And I feel like you've had probably a very similar journey to these two people that you had called in. When we first met, we were both in the public health and nonprofit and social justice spaces. And we both still kind of have a touch in those spaces, but in a different capacity now. And then also your life in the last few years, I would say. You've had a lot of different transitions, both professionally and personally. You were an ED of a nonprofit, and I really feel you just took it from the ground up and grew it to what it was. But simultaneously, at the same time,
Mhm.
you became a parent.
Mhm. Exactly.
And then at some point, you then stepped away from the professional role to have what I like to call a pause, that you
Yeah.
slowed down. So, talk to me a little bit about why it was important for you at that particular time
Mm.
to slow down and to
Yeah.
pause.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing is I want to also acknowledge that there's space that needs to be made for a pause, right? Like that, I want to acknowledge that there is privilege and also other people and other circumstances and things that allow us to even take that pause. So I kind of want to first kind of offer my gratitude and thanks to the ability to be able to do that, right? And also talk about why at that particular point in time I was able to, not just from a financial perspective, but also from the perspective of I was in my early 40s. So career wise, I felt like I can sit and pause for a second, because my life is and will be continue, to be connected to social justice. But when I was in my 20s doing social justice work, I was standing on the shoulders of people who came before and fought so many good fights. And I kind of felt like now I get to sit and let other people be on my shoulders and take the mantle forward, and let me support you from the sidelines. Let me bring you a sandwich if you're out in the streets, but then come back because I need to take care of my kid. Like, and I can do that, and you all can take the fight forward. You know what I'm saying? That was one of the first ways that I felt it. The first time it kind of came up for me that, hey, I need to pause. It was coming from this place of, because I deserve to, because I've done it and I've done the work. And there's something telling in there that, like, I had to feel like I could deserve it. So we can talk about that. But I did feel that. I did feel like, okay, I deserve it now because I've done the work, I've put it in. And so now I've earned this. I've earned this pause, and I can do that and others can take it forward. And I think with that is also recognizing that there are others, which was another huge revelation to me. I think for so many of us in different circumstances, and especially when we come from, I'm marginalized from the fact of being South Asian, being, one of the smaller ethnic minorities within the larger AAPI, but then AAPI being one of the smaller, racial ethnic minorities within the larger people of global majority in the US. So there's that. The fact that I'm queer, all of those things, I've often felt like I was the only one in the room that was speaking up for X, right? And I think I started to kind of feel like, okay, it's on me. I got to do it. Otherwise, who else is going to do it? But recognizing and knowing and trusting that there are others that can and will and have the ability to. But that's really where I was coming from, of this thing of like, hey, it's okay, Sapna, you're not indispensable. And I think that's an important thing, like there are others and it's going to be all right. Let them do it. Let them pick it up and do it, right? Like was also an important part of understanding for me why the pause was important. And then the last thing I'll say is, I think for me, my pause was personal in the sense of I had grown this nonprofit, like you said. I felt like it was important for me to take a step back because a lot of EDs do get into those roles and stay for 20, 30, 40 years. And there isn't room then for the organization to evolve and to take a new shape. So I wanted to get out of the way, to allow for a new manifestation of the organization to take shape, which I didn't feel like I could do if I was continuing to be in that ED role. And personal because I finally became a parent after what was a very long journey. And being in my 40s, being a parent, I was like, I'm not wasting any time. Now I finally have a young kid. I want to spend my time with my child because being an ED is 150% of your attention and your energy, and being a parent is as well. And in my decision making, if my child is going to win that, like I don't have 300% of myself to give, so I'm going to pick my child. So that was the other reason why I chose to pause. And again, I was afforded that ability to do so, and I so cherish that, and so cherish the fact that I was able to, that I had the power and the strength to be able to pull away and to take a pause for the last truly 3 years. And it's allowed me to reinvent myself, which I think also happens. You were talking about winter being a season of hibernation, and it's also what happens on the other side of that, right? Like one of my kids' storybooks is about how bears go into the den and hibernate, and when they emerge, little baby bear cubs come out with the bears, right? Because all that change and transformation is also happening. It's not just like they're just resting and sleeping. There's something happening in that rest. It's not, rest is also fruitful, right? Rest is also productive. So yeah.
So beautiful. And I resonate with you because our kids are same age, actually.
Yeah.
Right? All of that. And thank you for also lifting up that you were resourced to be able to take that pause.
Right.
And like you said, the rallies in so many other people's lives, that might not be an option right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you were able to do that. I think the other thing that I really received from you is this just keen awareness of growth for other people to be able to grow in their roles, that it is a disservice, actually, if you stay.
Right? Yeah.
That's a little bit,
I know.
But ain't that the truth, right?
Yeah.
To also recognize that in some ways you're also stifling your own growth.
Yeah. Exactly.
And to be able to recognize that it is time for me to transition and shift and pivot, however that's going to look like. So beautiful. You talked about rest. I am curious, as you were growing up, and I'm sure that it perhaps has evolved, you shed light on it a little bit, but what was the story that you grew up with around rest?
So in a nutshell, when I growing up, rest was frowned upon. The message I got, the narrative I got was, and I remember very clearly being told from a very young age, probably the first rhyme I ever learned was early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. And my parents used to say it all the time. And the hidden thing behind it is you have to get up and you got to do your work, and you have to constantly do your work. And there's no space for resting or relaxing or any of that. Like just nose to the grindstone and do it, even to the point of having some feelings around having quote unquote too many friends when I was in school, because my job is just to be studying, to be working, right? So I feel like I definitely got a lot of my narrative from many different places was that rest is frowned upon. You should not be resting. There's no time for rest, and that may be why I delayed my pause a bit. I think I could have paused earlier, and I maybe pushed that off a little bit, to the detriment of my own mental health and to the detriment of perhaps, others in my life as well, because it causes frayed relationships and it causes frayed inner peace when you don't pause when you're being called to do so, right? But I just couldn't get past that message of, why are you pausing? Why are you resting? Why do you have to leave now? And to the point that even the other day I was playing, they have these online games now because everything's virtual. And so like you're hanging out on Zoom with your best friends and whatever. So I was hanging out with a group of my friends and we were playing some game and you had to guess the person that would match a particular attribute, right? Like, so within your friend circle, you match the person to the thing. And so something will come up like, oh, reads a lot of books. And then you guess which person would be the one that checks that. Like, it's kind of like doing a superlative awards, whatever. And it was most likely to really be able to rest, most likely to be able to enjoy their rest or something to that extent. And my friends picked me. And I have to say, my reaction to that was so negative.
I'm curious.
I don't know. It was like this like this guttural,
Wow.
Instinctual reaction was bad. It felt like they were saying something bad about me. It felt like they were calling me lazy or unproductive, or, something spiraled in me. And for the rest of the conversation, I couldn't even really engage. Like I just kind of like, I retreated a bit and, said goodnight to everyone. Didn't do anything at the time because I was just grappling with these feelings. Like, why am I having this reaction to having been called most likely to be able to enjoy their rest? And I talked to one of the friends in that group later about it. And I was like, I just really, it really rubbed me the wrong way. And she was like, Sapna, we meant that as a compliment because you know how to dig into when you take a break, you do it. Like you party hard and you rest hard and you work hard. Like, you know how to do both fully. And I was like, yeah, but I don't know. And all these things. She's like, you got some stuff to work out around your ideas of the rest. I was like, I do, absolutely, but she was like, we did not mean it in a negative way at all. We were trying to say it as a compliment, that the rest of us need to learn from you how to actually pause when we need to, so it's just interesting. So your question about what were the narratives that was coming from? Yeah, those are all the narratives. And
Wow.
So it's a lot of baggage. It's a lot of baggage to work through. And yet that's why I think I feel even more proud of myself that I made the decision to do it. And I pushed through those negative messages and still took the rest and took the pause that I needed, that my relationship needed, that my family needed, all of that. And my organization needed, so yeah.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point. There's so many things. I can go so many different directions right now. But let me start with this one. You talked about the rest is not just for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's for a lot of other people around you and how you show up. I just feel that really lands in a different way. It's different when you come from the perspective that we're all in relation with each other and we're all interconnected as opposed to being individual. And dare I say it, this is really part of decolonizing work and even to accept rest. And as not as a sign of weakness.
Exactly.
As a sign of strength.
Right.
You and I both have a background. We have always worked in immigrant rights work within BIPOC communities. And this is not the first time that I've heard this narrative. I feel like I've heard it very often in similar circles. Why do you think it's so hard?
Yeah.
for people like us to rest?
Somebody had told me once that urgency and deadlines are tools of white supremacy. Like that having, I may not be saying it completely correct, but essentially that this drive to have to produce and do stuff and, get it done. And like, what are the takeaways and what are the next steps? And like all of that stuff is all part of white supremacy. And if we were really to go back to our roots, then a lot of our sort of indigenous roots are of actually resting when it's time to rest, and going back to like thinking about the seasons, and like coming from agrarian agricultural societies, like taking a pause when the seasons don't allow you to do the work, and all of that is what we would naturally be doing. And it's capitalism, it's neoliberalism, it's so many things that have pushed us into having to produce all the time, right? But you were talking about the immigrant community, sort of where it comes from. I know my narrative is not unique to me. I've definitely heard it from other BIPOC folk as well. And yeah, I mean, I think that part of it is that we have also been inculcated in this capitalist framework of needing to produce and needing to work, and because you need to, in the sense of like, you need to pay the bills, and the heat needs to be on, and like the water needs to be on, and like all, like there's a practical reason to why that stuff has to happen. And I know I'm only talking in the context of paid labor, and that's not the only rest and pause that exists. There's unpaid labor deserves rests and pauses as well, for sure. For example, parenting, which is like one of the most laborious jobs, unpaid laborious jobs, deserves rest and pause too. But I think there's a practical element to why people don't. But at the same time, there's also this thing about, I think, worth or value, and like, how do you show your worth? How do you show your value? And part of it is by not pausing, essentially, by being active, by doing things. People joke that in DC, that the first question that you get asked is not even what's your name, but what do you do? And I try so hard when we were socializing, pre March 2020, when we were in spaces that we were meeting new people, to never make that be the first question I ask somebody new. Because what do you do? Like, how do you exist in this world is maybe a better way of saying it than like, what is your source of income, is essentially what you're asking by what do you do, right? But I think there's just a lot behind that around how we're proving, how we're told, how we're taught that we're supposed to prove our worth. And so that's maybe why pausing is so difficult.
Yeah. What do you do? Do is like the focus, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to be.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
Who are you?
Who are
right?
you? Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right. We could totally go off on a tangent on just this topic, but you also brought another thing, and I want to shift a little bit the conversation, because you're doing something super exciting for many reasons. But what has piqued me in particular, especially when I read your bio, is just the multifaceted aspect of the work that you are doing now. So talk to me a little bit about your consulting.
Yeah, so that's connected to the pause, actually, because again, right, I was saying during rest, that's actually when things grow, and like seeds are allowed to germinate. I mean, just simple gardening basics, right? Like, they need to go in the soil, they need to germinate, and they need to rest for a while. And some seeds rest for a really long time, and other seeds sprout a little sooner. But in the analogy, and this leads me to my consulting, I have seeds that were probably, put in the soil like 20 years ago, that are now being allowed to germinate because of the pause that I took. And those have always been sort of in the back of my mind as interests, because I think I knew that seed had been planted, and I just didn't know what was happening with it. But I was like, oh yeah, that's right, I had that seed planted. What happened to that? So one of those is that I majored in religion when I was in college, and I kind of, again, planted that seed, did that thing, and then just kind of forgot about it. And it's been sitting and resting under that soil. And from a personal perspective, when my wife and I got married, we had to write our own wedding ceremony. We couldn't find a pandit, a Hindu religious person to do our ceremony. And you remember, like, we kind of created our own thing. And it was 2010. The law had just gotten passed. There was one other couple that we knew, one other lesbian couple that had gotten married in a Hindu ceremony that we could have looked at as a blueprint. but not a lot of examples. And my wife is Muslim, so we also wanted to combine the Hindu and Muslim traditions. And so that seed of like, having a religion background, and also my grandfather, who I mentioned earlier, being a priest, like all those little seeds there, I started officiating weddings for other couples, because it still remains a problem to this day that same-sex couples cannot find officiant to marry them. And I decided to focus on the Hindu aspect because I wanted to be authentic to my own background and my own, knowledge base, and to same-sex couples. And interestingly, as I've been doing that, I have met actually a lot of straight couples, a lot of heterosexual couples who are now calling upon me for my services. And like this year alone, I have 7 weddings, a lot of weddings that were put off from a couple of years ago, but already 7 weddings that I'm booked for. And of those, 3 are straight. And that's a huge shift. But these are folks looking for progressive, feminist approach to a Hindu ceremony, and also a Hindu ceremony that's not 3 or 4 hours long, which are, ours typically tend to be. So it's about taking that and germinating it now in this new way, and giving myself space to explore it a little bit and to see what it can look like. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is I've always been really interested in taking what I learned as a nonprofit executive and applying it as a kind of, I want to be in the wings now. I don't want to be the ED. I don't want to be front and center, having to make all of the myriad decisions every day. But I can be in the sidelines. I can be your Cyrano de Bergerac, and I can sit and I can try to whisper to you suggestions. And so I started coaching other EDs around decisions that they were making. Who should I put in my board of directors? When do I file my 501c3 paperwork? What does a fundraising plan look like? All of those things that I had to kind of walk the walk and figure out. I was like, why can't I support others in that piece? And so I can be out of the limelight, because that's not my interest now. I loved it for years. Don't get me wrong. I did. And I'm ready to, that's part of my pause, is I'm ready to actually retreat myself. And I don't need to be on anything. I don't need my name on anywhere. I don't need my image on anything. I just want to be there and support you and make the work be good, And so doing some of that nonprofit work in terms of supporting nonprofit organizations in growing and allowing themselves to germinate and to realize new potentials and new paths and stuff. And then the third area of my work is interpretation and translation. And that too is a seed that was planted long ago, in the sense that my first language was Gujarati. I was born and brought up in the US, but I was primarily with my grandparents from 0 to 5, and they primarily spoke Gujarati. So my first language was Gujarati. I didn't really speak English until I was starting to go to school, like age 5, because I didn't go to preschool. Age 5, it's like thrust in. And so I was never in English as a second language. I wasn't put into those classes at that time, but that has always been something that resonates with me, is the experience of someone who doesn't speak English as a primary language. And I still, I have a lot of family members who also don't speak English as a primary language. And the work that you and I did in New York too, with immigrant communities, and how navigating the systems as it is so challenging, just being a new immigrant. And then on top of that, the language barriers and the class barriers and just everything. So that's always been an interest of mine. And it's been from childhood. And I've loved languages ever since I was young, really loved languages. So doing interpretation and translation work is another area that I was like, and these have always been there, right? And if you read the about me part, on my website, I think it kind of meanders a little bit. And I'm like, you know what, that's okay. I'm going to lean into this thing of, quote unquote, jack of all trades, and which is seen as a negative thing. But as that rhyme progresses, the end of that rhyme is something about how Jack is perfectly happy with the fact that Jack can do many things, go Jack, and go Sapna, to understand and to appreciate that and to just kind of lean into it. So I wanted to read you a quote. It was a tweet that a friend shared with me.
Yes, please.
And it's like really resonating, because it was a tweet by a person named Ryan Boyd. So I want to just give credit where credit's due. And they said, "My life improved dramatically once I accepted that I have no singular all-consuming calling, and instead just want to do a variety of stuff I kind of like until I eventually die." And so maybe a little grim, but the point being that, like, why not now too, especially for after this pause, to do the things I like and that I'm good at and that I can, and to just accept the fact that they might be multifaceted and varied and not connected. I mean, I was a double major in religion and biology. All my entire life, I've been kind of, polar opposite, and I'm a Gemini. So like, there's many reasons why.
Throw that in.
Throw that in too. So there's many reasons why it's like, it all makes sense. It all goes together somehow. It's all a rainbow, it's all good.
Right, right. I mean, I love that you brought this up, and because it's multi-passionate, and one thing doesn't have to overtake the other. They can happen and they can coexist at the same time. And all of this stuff together makes this beautiful tapestry that is you, that is uniquely you. So, I am curious though, because there's probably folks that are listening to this that may be very similar. They have multiple things. I am one of them. I am a life coach. I facilitate groups. I am also an energy healer.
Yeah.
And I am a parent, I am a daughter. I do so many things. I'm also interested in a bunch of other things too. And sometimes I feel like, whether it's society or we tell ourselves stories that we grew up with, we feel like we got to put ourselves in a box.
Right.
So what advice would you have for folks that, want to pursue something similar? Maybe want to make a transition and they have a lot of things that they're interested in. Do you have any advice for folks?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I want to say that I think taking from my niece, actually, who is now just turned 18, but I remember when she was 3 or 4, and those questions that adults always ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right. And her response for years was, I want to be an astronaut who takes care of pets in space, because she really wanted to be a vet and she really wanted to be an astronaut. And so she didn't even say, can I be both? She just herself was like, I'm going to be an astronaut who takes care of animals in space, because I am going to combine together the things that bring me joy. And for years, that was her standard answer. And now she's 18 and she's an incredible illustrator and going into communications and media and all of that. But I just love that. And I still think about that, because that's a piece of advice that I would give is, be an astronaut that takes care of animals in space. Like, take the things that really you care about, that bring you joy and that allow you to show up in this world the way that you want to, and make a way for them to work together, because they all can work together. That is one thing that I love doing, is drawing a line between two dots that seemingly doesn't seem to exist. There is a way to connect those dots, and find a way to do that, if that's what is that brings you joy, and that you're able to do it all. It doesn't have to be something that necessarily fits together. It can be, again, different varied things that you're good at and that make you happy. Yeah.
Be a wayfinder.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I love how you said she didn't ask if it was possible. She figured out how to think it could be possible.
Yep, exactly.
Children are so wise.
Kids they're so wise. And I love that. I love seeing young people not ask permission to dream the impossible and to consider things that are outside of, because they don't know, they haven't yet been given the rigid guidelines of this is how the only way to be, right? And so they're able to dream the impossible. They're able to dream whatever they want in their heads. And that's so freeing, actually. And as we grow up, we get more and more, frameworks put on us. But if we can return to that childlike 3-year-old space of being able to just dream the impossible, I think that would really do us all a lot of service in finding what we need, what we want.
You are really speaking to my heart, because a lot of the folks that I coach, that is the process that they're going through in many respects, in very different forms, right? But it's to reawaken dreams that have been in hibernation and to remember who they are.
Yeah.
And what it is that makes them come alive.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh,
Exactly,
oh my
exactly.
goodness. Thank you to your niece
Yeah,
for that reminder.
right.
So, the last couple years, some people have called it the Great Reset, the Great Awakening. I think for both you and I, we have kind of been going through transitions before the pandemic. And
Mm-hmm.
so I am curious, when we think about this time, did you learn anything new?
Hmm.
And what's been the biggest surprise to you and why?
During this this winter season or through this
This, I
pandemic?
would say the last couple years, having
Yeah.
already gone through some major transitions, even before the collective
Mm-hmm.
transition, right, that we're going through as humanity.
I mean, I think this period in particular, the pandemic period, and the last couple of years when everyone else has been having this realization of, I should leave and quit what I'm doing if I don't like it, or if it's not bringing me joy or not allowing me to spend time with my family. I mean, I think one thing that I've learned is it's given me validation for sure for the decision to have done that prior to the pandemic period. It also actually made me prolong my pause a little bit because I had initially thought that my pause would maybe be until my child was 1 or 2. I think actually was, I thought until I was nursing, I would be kind of focused on parenting full time. And I nursed until my kid was 2.5. And I thought, okay, so now I'm free and I'm going to finish my pause. And what happened really literally after she turned 2.5 is March 2020 and the lockdowns and the pandemic. So I was just ready to kind of, okay, I'm done with my pause. Let me get out there into the world again, emerge from my cocoon and see what's out there and where everyone is and what's happening as I step out of my cave. And then now everybody else is in their caves, So it did validate for me that the pause was good. It was strange for me because I was like, oh, okay, I guess reset. Wait a minute. Let's prolong this pause a bit. And actually, I don't know if I had mentioned this to you, but during the last couple of years, I also, because my kid was in playgroup space where there was a little bit of early childhood education already beginning, and the socialization had been beginning right when the lockdown started, I felt so, my biggest upset, I think, during that time was all through her eyes, as I'm sure you also can appreciate. It was through our kids' eyes, seeing their worlds that were opening up just suddenly have to shut and close down. And I think I was being called most in that moment to do something about that. And I thought, let me somehow take on the job of figuring out her education right now, continuing to figure out her education right now. And granted, she wasn't even 2 yet, but there were things that they were already starting to learn in the world and in, different spaces. So I created a homeschool curriculum. And this was also a huge area of learning because I partnered with another mother who was also full-time parenting, and we were looking at Montessori curricula and all these things online because we're not educators by profession. I haven't been trained to be an educator, but this is what I was being called to do in this moment, for my kid. And and not just for my kid, because once we looked at the Montessori curricula that are out there, they're so Eurocentric and so, white dominant, that whole space, that we had to grow something new. And so, it says, listen to an hour of Mozart, fine. It's great to be exposed to Mozart. Also, there are a lot of South Asian composers that you could be listening to. The other mother I was working with is Mexican. There's Mexican composers you could be, working with. And so we looked at our own backgrounds and everything, and we created, and her child was speaking primarily Spanish. My child was speaking primarily Hindi, Urdu at the time. And so we created a bilingual, multilingual, multiracial homeschool curriculum. And never in a million years was that supposed to be part of my path, right? And so if anything, it just deepened my understanding and my, validated my understanding that it's okay to grow a new bud, right, on your plant. Like it's a new, you didn't know it was there. This is not a seed that I had planted before. And yet here it is taking shape and taking root. And so, I think that's probably my biggest lesson, is that I think I said to you today that you got to just ride the wave as it comes. And that's probably a reference that you get more than me because of being in California. But I think, this idea of the wave coming and jumping on it and going with it. That's something that I went along with. I opened myself up to that possibility more so during this time.
I love it. So, we recently just celebrated Lunar New Year. It is the year of the water tiger.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about this energy supposed to be like super potent this year because the tiger is symbolic of courage, of bravery, being super fierce.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you're a dreamer and you take action on your dreams, you gotta you have to embody all those, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
What do you consider brave?
Honestly, what I was saying earlier, right now, I think the bravest people are our kids, are our young ones, especially the ones that are like in this 2 to 5 year category that are having their lives constantly reshaped, interrupted, redefined, having to pivot, virtual learning, not virtual learning. Am I going in person? Am I not going in person? Do we wear a mask? Do we not wear a mask? Am I supposed to get a shot? Can I get a shot yet? I don't know. Like all these questions, and like suddenly their worlds change. And I picked two because I feel like at that age, kids started to get aware of their surroundings and where they're going. But I just feel like they're just incredible, resilient, brave humans right now on our planet that we can really learn from. And I want to look at what they're going through in that positive light, because there's a lot of sadness that also gets mixed up in all of this. But to take a positive spin on it, they're learning so much about resilience. They're learning so much about how to, oh, my parents in a meeting right now on the computer again. Like, what does that mean? I think that, and they're just learning to deal with it and to go along with it. And it's just remarkable to me. I think that right now the water tigers are these kids, they're so brave and so courageous. But I did want to say something also about you were talking about advice and like, making shifts and changes and all of that. So the name of my company is Chingaree, and Chingaree means spark. And I picked that because I've always liked the word, first of all, but also that a spark can grow into a big flame, right? And I was thinking about this over winter break. My wife and kid and I went away to West Virginia to a little cabin, and we just stayed inside for like 5 days and watched the snow and built fires every day because A, it's COVID safe activity, and B, it's more pause and cocooning. And as I was staring at the fire and thinking about how those sparks turn into a huge flame, because I was the one feeding the fire and making the fire, the conditions have to be just right? What goes into the transformation from a spark to a raging fire? It's the placement of the logs, right? So it's about positioning and who's around and able to support and give energy to that spark. It is about whether or not the logs are damp or wet, or if they're dry. So it's also about the conditionality of your surroundings and like whether or not you're able to weather the moment that you see the spark and that you can take that spark and grow it into a flame, right? And it's about what you feed the spark, what you give it, because you have to give the kindling, you got to give the paper, like if it's a big process to kind of create that little spark into a flame. But one piece in all of that, and it was just my thing at night to do, is after that spark turns into a fire and the fire dies out, you have those embers for the longest time, right? And it was so beautiful to me, actually. Also got annoying because I'm like, I want to go to sleep. I want you all embers to like go out so I can go to sleep. But those embers last forever. And I think that's another piece of advice that I want to pass on is like, don't forget that if there is a spark and there was a fire at one point, those embers are going to be there, and you can very easily put another log on those hot red coals and turn it into a fire again. So it's okay to take that pause. It's okay to step away. It's okay to like say, I need a rest for a second, because that those embers are always going to be there. They're going to be hanging on, and you just wait till you have whatever capacities you need to get that log and put it back on again, So that's just another thing that I think I've learned, is that it's all right if now's not the time, but eventually it might be.
I love it. I'm part of this group of women, and we work with the elements, and we say before you become a fire, you're a chispa, right?
Yeah,
You're a spark.
that's
And
right.
it's exactly what you said was you need that spark to ignite this idea, this new way of being, but the fire is also there to burn things
Yep.
that you need to
Exactly.
burn through that are not actually helping you
True.
in any way, right?
Yeah.
And the fire is also fuel. But I love how you said the embers take a really long time. That means that they're still there. So it means we can go back.
We can go back. Yeah.
And we have that within us. If
Right.
we are a spark, we have that within us to reignite again. And sometimes it is just let it cool down for a little bit,
Exactly.
you know?
Yeah.
Oh. And also, too, I mean, we have been using the fireplace a lot too because the kids love s'mores. So learning how to, put on a good fire. But,
Yeah.
the ashes, and you and I are both gardeners, you actually can use the ash. It's fertilizer.
I heard this.
And so I think it's just so cyclical. It's all of that. Just because it ended doesn't mean that it's done,
Right.
that it actually could nourish something else to grow. So I just think your image of what that is just so poignant. So how can folks connect with you if they want to learn a little bit more about your work?
Yeah, I have a website and my phone number is on there. My email is my name, Sapna, at chingareeconsulting.com. And so that's probably the best way to contact me is through email. Get in touch. And whether it's all the different myriad of things that are listed on my website or just wanting to connect about something I said, please do connect.
Oh, I love it. So to bring it back to the title of this series, which is Unlock Your Inner Creator. What does being a creator mean to you, Sapna?
That's a really good question. You know that in the Hindu triumvirate, there's a creator, a sustainer, and a destroyer, right? Those are the three main energies that are considered that's the cycle of being. So
that's the Trinity within.
That's the Trinity,
right?
Exactly.
That yes,
exactly. Yeah, the creator, the sustainer, and the destroyer. And so what came up for me, maybe from this very cyclical perspective, when you say what is your creator, I thought the creator can't exist in isolation. It exists in that Trinity. And it can that being a creator can only exist because of some destruction that's happened, and also because of something that's being sustained as well, right? So my creating side, my ability to create within me has only come because I have put out fires elsewhere and I have had to close doors elsewhere. In other words, kind of destroy or stop things that were not serving me anymore to be able to create. Right. So that is one, I think, important element of unlocking your inner creator is allowing some things to be destroyed and also continuing to sustain the things that do feed you and that do nourish and that do allow you to create more. And knowing what those resources are, also acknowledging what those resources are and like calling them in. I think a lot of parenting podcasts and books that you see say that you can't be a good parent if you're not well rested yourself and you're not well sustained yourself, right? And so I have learned and I have tried to communicate this to my kid that like if I lose my temper, listen, it's not your fault. I was not sustained today. I don't use that language with her, but basically I didn't get enough rest. Mama's too tired. Mama needed to sleep some more last night. Mama didn't have her coffee. Mama didn't have a good meal. Whatever it is, I was not sustaining myself. And therefore I cannot be there to be present, with you. And I can't create with you. I can't make lovely paintings with you. I can't create a whole imaginary scene that you want to do right now with you because I am not nourished and resourced. And so I'm just bringing it back to that in terms of the practical of creation. as well. So yeah, I think those are some responses I would have to what is your creator. Yeah. And I want to say about winter too, because I love what you said about winter. I love the focus on winter being a time of rest and a time of pause and all of that. And the things that emerge out of that rest is important to kind of start thinking about, and also reflecting on what's come before. Because I think winter also, a lot of people spend this time as a time for reflection and thought. My kid is in an outdoor school. They're in a nature preschool. They love being outside. So it's just perfect. It's also great for my own anxiety around COVID to have Syra be outside all the time. But what's so interesting to me is that growing up, I always thought about winter as being kind of dull and being kind of nothing happens. Everyone's just hibernating at home and not a lot happens at this time. And it's dreary and dark and the sun goes down so early and all of those things happen. And what's so interesting is her teachers who come from this nature curriculum background, there's so much that they are discovering every day about what is occurring in winter. And she comes home and tells me these things from school, and I've just not even thought about it. Winter is a very busy time, and for the animals and the bugs and the plants and like all the stuff that's happening. So she comes home and tells me about, decomposing insects that help with decomposing, and about the ants that are hibernating, which I don't know. Did you know that when ants are hibernating in a log and you touch them, they don't move at all? Like they are so gone, like they're just still and don't move at all. And so she's seen hibernating ants now. They talk about where the animals have burrowed inside the ground, and like activity is happening. And it has just felt like an opening up a new appreciation of the beauty of winter, seeing it through, my kids' eyes coming from that nature perspective as well. So there's also that part of it. It can be just as exciting a time of year as summer, if you think of it that way.
Yeah. And I love how it actually goes back to what you were saying. Decomposing, something has to be broken down and destroyed.
Yeah.
There's things that are happening in winter right now to sustain us. Resting is sustaining us. That movement, so that we can emerge in spring to create.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
I love it. I love how you also brought it just back to your faith.
Yeah.
Part of the triads, it's so potent. So I always like to end these conversations. I either do a card pull or we read from a book. We are going to use a new deck called the Soul Coaching Oracle card. So what I do is I put my hand over and then you just tell me to stop, and it'll be our closing thought for this conversation.
I like it. Okay, great. Tell me when to.
Whenever you want to stop.
Okay, stop.
Okay, let's see what I pull. This is a good one. Opening.
Nice.
So the message and affirmation is, I am opening to receiving the gifts of the universe.
I love it. I love it. Really poignant right now.
Yeah, we are opening. We are opening in a lot of ways. We are being expansive. Oh, Sapna, this conversation was so heartwarming. I feel so filled up in a lot of ways. And
same.
Just the way that you tie things together and the stories that you weave in are just so, so beautiful. And I love how you also incorporated the young people in your life. And for us to also just remember their wonder and their expansiveness, their unlimited way of just seeing the world. And how can we as adults embrace that, especially in this time of this awakening of creating new things. So I'm so grateful to have you as my sibling in this journey, to have you here.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you, Noilyn. I love
You're so welcome.
Yeah, love chatting with you.
Me too. So folks, this is the end of this first episode of season 3, and I hope that you tune in the coming weeks as we bring on more creators. Until then, take good care, and I hope everybody uses this time to nourish themselves, to restore, and to rest in all the ways that you need. Until then, we'll see you next time.
For listening, if you enjoyed this conversation and you'd like to help support this interview series, make sure to tune in to the next episode and share it with others. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at The Radiant You, U as in the letter U, and sign up for my newsletter by visiting www.theradiantu.com. Again, that's theradiantu.com. Thanks, everyone. And remember, dream big, dream bold, and take brave steps. I'll see you next time.